awareness of ATTR-CM, a rare heart condition that impacts Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. As part of this program, Pfizer is teaming up with groups in the community to explain the warning signs of a heart condition called ATTR-CM. This is to help people who have this heart condition to talk about it with their doctor. So what are we talking about today? First, we're going to talk about heart failure and how it affects Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. We're also going to talk about ATTR-CM, a health condition that is linked to heart failure. After that, we will talk about the steps to find out if you have the hereditary form of ATTR-CM. We will share some important information that is available to help you learn more. And towards the end of the presentation, you will hear from Mr. Don Cheney, who is living with the hereditary form of ATTR-CM. And finally, I will be available to answer any questions that you may have. As a reminder, virtual audience members, please use the QA function and click on the box that says anonymous before submitting the question. For those who are in person, handouts and index cards are already made available to you. So if you raise your hand, a member of the church will be able to give you an index card so you can put your questions down, and we will make sure that we answer as many of them as we can. Remember, you can submit your questions for me at any time during the presentation. All right, so let's start off with the topic of what is heart failure. We want to talk about how it affects Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. Heart failure is a condition where the heart has become weak, damaged, or stiff. And as a result, the heart does not pump blood as well as it should. Although heart failure is serious, it does not mean the heart has stopped beating and pumping blood. Heart failure usually starts slowly and it gets worse over time. It is important for us to remember that heart failure is more likely to affect Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. People with heart failure may feel very tired or weak. Sometimes we call that fatigue. They could feel short of breath, either when they exercise or when they're at rest, or they could have irregular heartbeat. Sometimes you might hear us call that palpitations or cardiac arrhythmia. They can have swollen legs, ankles, or feet. Earlier, we talked about how heart failure may happen when the heart muscle has been damaged because of another condition. Some of these conditions include a previous heart attack or high blood pressure. But heart failure can also be caused by a variety of other health conditions. We're here today to talk about one of those other conditions. The key points to remember from this section are: heart failure is a condition where the heart muscle is weak, damaged, or stiff. It means the heart is not pumping blood as well as it should. Heart failure is more likely to affect Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. And heart failure is usually caused by another disease or condition. So we've just heard that heart failure may be caused by a variety of diseases or conditions. One of these conditions, however, is ATTR-CM, or what we call transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy. It is a serious condition, but it's often overlooked. That's why we're talking about it today. Later, we're going to talk about the symptoms of ATTR-CM. But before that, let's hear a little bit about ATTR-CM as it affects the heart and other parts of the body. We're going to watch this video.
This video describes what happens inside your body when you have ATTR-CM. We'll start by looking at a normal, healthy body, which makes many different proteins every day to help it work. Each protein has a different job. One of these proteins is called transthyretin, also known as TTR. Its job is to carry other substances through the bloodstream. TTR works well when it is neatly folded. But in some people, it can become unstable, misfold, and tangle together. These tangled TTR proteins travel through the blood and build up in different parts of the body, which can cause problems. In the heart, these tangled TTR proteins cause the muscle walls to stiffen and thicken over time. This means the heart doesn't pump blood as well as it should. Eventually, it can lead to heart failure. Doctors call this ATTR-CM. Tangled proteins can travel to other parts of the body, causing problems there too, including glaucoma or other eye problems, low back pain, and numbness, pain, or tingling in both hands or fingers, or in the feet. ATTR-CM is a serious condition that is often missed. It is important to find it early. So talk to your doctor if you have heart failure and other symptoms, even if they seem unrelated to heart failure.
Yes, so as we saw in the video, ATTR-CM affects the heart. It can cause many of the same types of symptoms that we see with heart failure. We already talked about some of these symptoms. That could be like feeling tired or weak. Sometimes we call that fatigue. It could manifest as shortness of breath, just not being able to catch your breath at times when you do activity or at rest. Or it could manifest as an irregular heartbeat or what we call cardiac arrhythmia. Sometimes it manifests as swollen legs or ankles or feet. But in addition to those shown on the previous slide, ATTR-CM is associated with other symptoms, including ruptured or torn tendons. A tendon is where the muscle attaches to the bone. This can affect the arm, the bicep or ankle, the Achilles tendon. We can have symptoms in the stomach or gut issues, leading to diarrhea, constipation, feeling sick or nausea, or just feeling full quickly. It could manifest as pain or numbness in the lower back or legs, and a doctor may call this lumbar spinal stenosis. It could result in eye problems such as glaucoma. Or you could have symptoms of numbness, tingling, or pain in both hands or fingers. This is called bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome and is one of the most common symptoms of ATTR-CM. This could result in joint pain, for example, pain in the hip or knee. Or somebody might have symptoms of numbness, tingling, or pain in the toes or the feet. A doctor may call that peripheral neuropathy. So we see that we can have a variety of symptoms. All right, so there are two types of ATTR-CM. The first type is known as the wild type ATTR-CM, and the other type is the hereditary ATTR-CM. The wild type ATTR-CM often affects Caucasian or white males over the age of 60 years and is associated with aging. The hereditary ATTR-CM is the type most likely to affect Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. The symptoms can show up as early as 50 to 60 years, and it can affect both men and women. Hereditary ATTR-CM can be passed down through relatives, whereas wild-type ATTR-CM is not. Let's talk a little bit more about hereditary ATTR-CM. We've heard it's passed down through families, but how does that happen? It's because of a change in the TTR gene. As we saw in the video, everyone has genes which are made of DNA. Your genes are instructions of how the body functions. When a permanent change happens in the DNA that make up a gene, it is called a gene mutation. Gene mutations or changes may be inherited or passed down from parent to child. So mutations can lead to conditions such as hereditary ATTR-CM. It is important to remember that if you have hereditary ATTR-CM, it is not your fault. It's caused by a change in the TTR gene and not something that you have done. One of the gene changes linked to hereditary ATTR-CM is most often found in African American families. It is often referred to as the V122I mutation, and around 3 to 4% of African Americans have that mutation. This gene change can be inherited and passed down through relatives. For example, grandpa may have had this change in his gene and pass it on to your parent or your aunts or your uncles. But having a parent, a brother or sister with ATTR-CM does not mean you will get it. Also, not everybody with this change to the TTR gene develops symptoms of hereditary ATTR-CM.
All right. Lots of good information. Thank you so much for everything, Dr. Chiadika, so far. For the audience, here's where you get to chime in. Want to make sure that you're listening, but also retaining the information. So, what causes hereditary ATTR-CM? Is it being overweight? Is it eating too many fatty foods, not exercising, or a change in the TTR gene? Or, being honest, if you don't know. We want everyone in the audience, in person or in the virtual audience, to please respond. Take a few minutes. All right, and the results are in. The question was, what causes hereditary ATTR-CM? And 91% of you answered the question correctly. It's a change in the TTR gene. The cause of is a change in the TTR. Unlike other heart conditions, poor diet, lack of exercise, they don't cause hereditary ATTR-CM, although they may make heart failure symptoms worse. But this particular disease that we're studying today is by the change in the TTR gene. So very good, audience, for answering that question correctly. Dr. Chiadika?
Thank you. So early diagnosis of ATTR-CM is very important. ATTR-CM gets worse over time, so it is important to find it early. But ATTR-CM is often overlooked or mistaken for something else. This may be because the signs can appear unrelated to heart failure, so don't delay. It is important to talk to your doctor if you have any of the symptoms of ATTR-CM that we have already discussed today. Important notes to remember from this section are: ATTR-CM is a serious health condition that can lead to heart failure. Hereditary ATTR-CM is caused by a gene change or mutation that can be passed down through relatives. One of the gene changes linked to hereditary ATTR-CM is most often found in African American families. It is often referred to as the V122I mutation, and around 3 to 4% of African Americans have it. Unfortunately, the signs and symptoms of ATTR-CM are often missed. ATTR-CM gets worse over time, so it is important to find it early. And that is why it is important to talk to your doctor if you have any of the symptoms of ATTR-CM that we have discussed today. All right, so in this section, we will talk to you about how you or someone you know can find out if they have ATTR-CM. If you have heart failure and any of the symptoms we talked about today, the first step to finding out if you have ATTR-CM is to talk to your doctor. Remember that many of the symptoms of ATTR-CM may seem unrelated to heart failure. Other possible warning signs or red flags for ATTR-CM in people with heart failure can include losing weight with no known reason, or feeling lightheaded when you stand up. Some heart and blood pressure medicines can make you feel worse. While the signs and symptoms we've discussed today while the signs and symptoms we've discussed today don't mean that you have ATTR-CM, you should still tell your doctor. They may need to do some further testing. The more you tell your doctor, the better they can help you understand your condition. Once you've recognized the symptoms of ATTR-CM and you've spoken to your doctor, where's the path to getting diagnosis? First, your doctor may order tests to find out how your heart is working and look for signs of ATTR-CM. If ATTR-CM is a possibility, they will do another test or set of tests. This will help to confirm you have ATTR-CM. If you have ATTR-CM, your doctor may recommend a genetic test. Genetic tests are used to find out whether someone has either the wild type or the hereditary form of the condition. Genetic tests can confirm whether someone has the wild type of the hereditary form of ATTR-CM, either using a blood or saliva sample. If genetic tests confirm that you have the ATTR gene change, your relatives may be at risk of developing ATTR-CM and should also consider genetic testing. People who get genetic tests should consider genetic counseling, as your doctor recommends you to. Counseling can be useful both before and even after you get tested. This is to make sure that a person understands the test results, that they understand the impact the genetic information may have on their relatives, and that they know what the next steps are to take. I pass it on to you, Mr. Allen.
All right. By now, you can see by participating that answering these questions is really for your benefit. We want you fully engaged, gaining all the information that you're receiving today, but this is also going to help you retain it. So here's the next audience participation question. What is the most important factor that you consider before seeking care? What is the most important factor that you consider before seeking care? Is it reliable transportation? Is it access to a local doctor? Is it insurance coverage? Is it available childcare? Time off from work? Is it COVID? Is it travel plans? Or none of these? Take a moment to answer that question. Okay, I probably need to get a little more clarity on that question because it was for you to check all of those that apply to you, and it's really for us to get a snapshot of you as an individual patient and what's the most important factor. Most of you said none of the above. There are many of you that said access to a local doctor. The question was, what is the most important factor that you consider before you're seeking care? The most of you responded and said access to a local doctor. And the second runner-up to that is insurance coverage. So I'd say you're doing great and stay engaged because these questions really help you to digest the information, but to also personalize your personal experience. Dr. Chiadika.
Thank you, Pastor Allen. In this next section, I'm going to highlight some resources that can help you learn more about ATTR-CM and prepare for conversations with your doctor if needed. If you're interested in learning more about hereditary ATTR-CM, there's information that can help you. Pfizer's Get the Message fact sheet is a great option with information about hereditary ATTR-CM and symptoms of ATTR-CM. For our virtual attendees, this is now available in the chat. But for those of you who are in person today, there's a print version that's being made available to you. I believe at the back of the church, you can pick up one of those handouts. YourHeart'sMessage.com is a helpful website that contains information about ATTR-CM and how it is identified. Educational topics on the website include what ATTR-CM is and how it affects the body, how to look for signs and symptoms of ATTR-CM, how to talk to a cardiologist or other doctor about ATTR-CM, and how to help others by becoming an advocate for ATTR-CM awareness. The website also provides inspirational, supportive stories from real people with ATTR-CM. It provides links to support groups and resources. In addition, the website allows you to create a customized doctor discussion guide. This allows you to print a customized script that can help you start a conversation about ATTR-CM for the next time you visit your doctor. For our virtual attendees, this is now available to you via chat. And for those who are in person, there's a print version that is available to you as well at the back of the church.
All right, we've got question number 4 coming up. I just want to remind the viewing audience, if you look at the slide here on the screen, take your time, if you haven't done this, to go ahead and scan the QR code and put your code in so that you can participate in these questions. This is how we're gathering the information to post the results. So here's question number 4. How would you like to receive more information about the hereditary ATTR-CM? You can check all that apply. There's no right or wrong answer here. More events like this, your house of worship, your doctor, or yourheartsmessage.com/done. Take a moment to answer that question. All right, the results are now in. The question is, how would you like to receive more information about the hereditary ATTR-CM? And look at that, 72% of the audience says that they would like to receive more information from your doctor. That makes sense, he's the one caring for you. And then right behind that, in a tie for second place, is more events like this, yourheartsmessage.com, the website. And then these are all very, very close. And then, of course, your house of worship. And so thank you for sharing that information and your sentiment concerning that. That's a very important question. Now, it is my distinct honor and privilege to bring to the screen our very next speaker. He's actually going to share a testimony. And I would like to introduce to you this special guest. He's Mr. Don Chaney. For the Houstonians, especially the native Houstonians, you would remember who Mr. Don Chaney is. He's a former NBA basketball player, and not just any basketball player, but he was also the former coach for the Houston Rockets. Go Rockets. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a grandfather. Mr. Chaney was diagnosed with this hereditary ATTR-CM a few years ago and is committed to increasing the awareness of this disease, especially in the Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. Mr. Cheney, thank you for being here and welcome to the virtual stage.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Don Cheney, and in 2019, I was caught off guard when I was diagnosed with hereditary ATTR-CM. Even though I knew my relatives had a history of heart problems, I didn't know the signs and symptoms of ATTR-CM. So my condition went undiagnosed for a long time. Since then, I've made it my mission to share my story with others to help raise awareness of hereditary ATTR-CM. I'm excited to be teaming up with Pfizer on Voices for the Heart to encourage early and appropriate diagnosis of ATTR-CM, especially in the Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney, for that wonderful insight, and it's wonderful to know somebody or know of someone who's actually had that disease and was properly diagnosed, which is why you're here giving that great information. Now, what I'd like to do is turn the furtherance of this over to Dr. Chiadike. And for those of you that have sent in your questions, we've got Dr. Chiadike who is here to answer the questions that you have submitted.
Yes, thank you, Pastor Allen. Mr. Cheney, it's really a real honor to have you here today, and just also to hear you, share your story and to give your time is really a privilege. I have some questions for you, if I may. Sure. Did you know that you were living with heart failure before your ATTR-CM diagnosis?
Well, a few years ago, I started experiencing frequent heart-related symptoms like fatigue, palpitations, and shortness of breath. My mom and grandmother both passed away from heart disease, and I was worried that I may be facing the same issues as them. I underwent several tests and procedures to figure out what was going on, which is how I was diagnosed with heart failure. What my cardiologist and I didn't know yet was that I actually had this rare heart condition, ATTR-CM.
Right. Did you experience any other symptoms besides these heart-related symptoms?
For about 10 years, I also suffered from carpal tunnel syndrome, which is numbness, tingling, or pain in the fingers, knee pain, and swelling in my knees and feet. But I assumed these were caused by my years of playing professional basketball. Mm-hmm. I never made the connection that these symptoms could have something to do with my heart. So when I started having heart problems, I never mentioned this part of my medical history to my cardiologist, but I wish I had so much earlier.
Yeah. Had you heard of ATTR-CM before that diagnosis?
Well, like many people, and even some doctors, I didn't know a lot about ATTR-CM. After speaking to my cardiologist, I learned that some of the symptoms can look like symptoms of heart failure, while others may not. In my case, and for many others, this can lead to delay or errors in finding out if you have ATTR-CM.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised to find out that the underlying cause of your heart failure was due to ATTR-CM?
I really was surprised when I found out I had ATTR-CM. Even though my grandmother and mom had heart failure, I was living a healthy, active lifestyle and had always received a good bill of health when it came to my heart. I didn't know that a gene passed down through relatives could cause ATTR-CM. What I've learned is that Black, African Americans, and Afro-Caribbean communities are more likely to have heart disease, including heart failure. But many like me may not know the cause. The fact is, if I had known, I may have been able to get the right diagnosis and start managing my condition sooner with the care of my doctor.
Certainly. What is your advice for members of Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities who may be experiencing symptoms like you and have a family history of heart disease?
Well, after I found out I had hereditary ATTR-CM, I spoke with my 3 adult children, my sisters and my brothers. I encouraged them to get tested and find out if they have the mutation I have. While some of them have been tested, not everyone has done so yet. I keep trying to do my part and reinforce why genetic testing and counseling is important, and if detected, why early action is key to managing ATTR-CM most effectively. Several relatives followed my advice. In fact, one of my relatives found out she has a gene mutation. Now she's closely monitoring any symptoms of hereditary ATTR-CM with the help of a cardiologist.
If someone suspects they have ATTR-CM, what should they do?
Well, it's very important for members of the Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities to have a heart-to-heart with their doctor. This is even more important if you have heart failure, a family history of cardiac issues, or any unresolved symptoms. Since it is rare and some doctors may not know a lot about it, ATTR-CM can often be overlooked. People should share all of their symptoms, even if they seem unrelated. This way, the doctor has a full picture of past and current medical history. This will help your doctor make the best decision for you. If someone has hereditary ATTR-CM, encouraging relatives to get tested can help them take action early.
Yes. How are you managing your hereditary ATTR-CM these days?
Well, today I work closely with my cardiologist to manage my hereditary ATTR-CM. My wife, Jackie, has been very supportive. She helped me on my journey to discovering my condition, and once we knew it was ATTR-CM, she made sure I took care of the situation right away. Now I stay active by spending time on my ranch, working on antique cars. I take my medicine as prescribed, and I'm enjoying my retirement surrounded by family and friends.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Cheney, for sharing your experience, your story, and your wisdom with us.
Thank you.
For more information about hereditary ATTR-CM and to read more about Mr. Don Cheney's story, please visit yourheartsmessage.com/DON, Don, okay? For our virtual attendees, this link is now available in the chat, and it will be made available for those attending in person as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cheney, and thank you so much, Dr. Chiadika, for that wonderful interview. Now, here we go to question number 5. If you've learned something new during this presentation, which of the following actions would you take? Again, if you learned something new during this presentation, which of the following actions would you take? Visit yourheartmessage.com/Don. Tell a family or friend about hereditary ATTR-CM, download the discussion guide, or do nothing. Take a moment. And the results are in. We've got sort of a mixed bag, but we have those of you, what would you do? What would you do for the following actions that you would take? Here we go. Visit yourheartmessage.com, tell a family or friend about the hereditary ATTR-CM, or download the discussion guide. All of this is great material, and you can't go wrong with any of these resources or actions, but we do encourage you to do something. And I'm glad that there was no one that elected not to do anything at all. Now we're going to take some time to answer some of the questions that came in from our viewing audience. So Dr. Chiadika is here to answer the questions that we've collected while you were here. So our very first question, Dr. Chiadika, How common is ATTR-CM?
It is not known how many people in the United States have the wild type or hereditary ATTR-CM, although it is believed to be a rare condition, meaning fewer than 200,000 people are affected by ATTR-CM in the US. One of the reasons we don't know how common ATTR-CM is or how many people have the condition is because it is believed to be significantly underdiagnosed. So there's not as much data available as there may be for other diseases that is a lot easier to diagnose.
Okay, next question. Wow, we've got some really great questions coming in. What are some of the reasons why Black Americans are disproportionately affected by heart disease and heart failure? That's a great question.
Yes, there are many reasons why Black or African Americans are disproportionately affected by heart disease or heart failure. Those include genetic factors, they include socioeconomic factors, and they include medical factors as well. Let's start with the genetic factors. Well, like the one we're talking about today, which is the hereditary ATTR-CM, this is the most common mutation that is associated with ATTR-CM in the US. That mutation is known as the V122I mutation, and is found almost exclusively in African Americans. Approximately 3 to 4% of African Americans are thought to have the V122I mutation, although not all individuals with the mutation develop symptoms of hereditary ATTR-CM. There's also socioeconomic factors. We know that there's a higher burden of cardiovascular disease for Black African Americans, even after we adjust for socioeconomic status and other cardiovascular risk factors. We also know that there are disproportionate amounts of medical factors that affect African Americans. Common health conditions, which include high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, that increase the risk for heart disease and stroke among Black and African Americans. We know that the prevalence of high blood pressure in Black and African Americans is the highest in the world. Not only is high blood pressure not more severe among Blacks compared to Caucasians, it also develops earlier in life. Blacks are disproportionately affected by obesity. Among non-Hispanic Blacks aged 20 and older, 63% of men and 77% of women are either overweight or obese. African Americans are more likely to have diabetes than Caucasians. So all these factors take into play and lead to higher proportion of these disease conditions in that population.
Thank you, Dr. Chiadika, for that. Here's another question. What should a person discuss with their doctor if they have heart failure and some signs of symptoms of ATTR-CM that were mentioned in this presentation? Another excellent question.
Yes. Knowing the right questions to ask your doctor can be very challenging, especially when someone is first learning about a disease condition such as ATTR-CM. Here are a few tips that may help to get that conversation going. It is important to mention if any relatives on either side of your family have or have had any heart-related issues. This is very useful information for the doctor because ATTR-CM can be hereditary. That means it's passed from a relative. Now, if you've had any prior testing, such as an electrocardiogram, echocardiogram, or what we call echo, or if you had lab tests such as N-terminal pro-BNP, or a troponin level that has been drawn or abnormal, be sure to share those results with your doctor. Always tell your doctor about any signs or symptoms you're experiencing, even if they seem unrelated to the heart. A history of carpal tunnel, lower back pain, or gastrointestinal issues may all link to the heart condition. ATTR-CM can affect everybody differently, so it's important that your doctor gets the full picture. Lastly, it can be helpful to prepare a list of questions and concerns to bring with you to your doctor appointment. On your heartsmessage.com that we've referenced here today, you can create a customized doctor discussion guide, and that includes a list of questions to help get the conversation started.
Thank you for that. Now, this question actually fits a conversation that I was having actually earlier this week. It seems that some doctors may not be able to put the symptoms together and to come up with the diagnosis of ATTR-CM. Is that true?
Unfortunately, that is true, Pastor Allen. The symptoms of ATTR-CM are similar to those of other more common causes of heart failure, and it may be very challenging to diagnose. Awareness of ATTR-CM among physicians remains low, which can also contribute to the underdiagnosis or to delayed diagnosis.
Wow. Well, Dr. Chiadika, we've got one more question, and these questions have all been great. Thank you, viewing audience, for your participation with this. Our last question is, once you're diagnosed with ATTR-CM, what can you expect next?
Yes, following a diagnosis, genetic testing and counseling is recommended to identify if it is the wild type or hereditary ATTR-CM. For those diagnosed with hereditary ATTR-CM, genetic testing and counseling is also important to determine whether family members are at risk, as the abnormal gene that causes hereditary ATTR-CM is passed down. Because ATTR-CM gets worse over time, early diagnosis and treatment are critical. Talking to your doctor can help you learn about potential treatment options that may help manage the condition. Okay, so I hope that after this program, we hope you take away a few important messages. ATTR-CM is a serious health condition that can lead to heart failure and is often overlooked in Black, African American, and Afro-Caribbean communities. Anyone with heart failure and unexplained symptoms of ATTR-CM should consider talking to their doctor. Remember to tell your doctor how you feel and about your symptoms that you're having. If it is confirmed that you have ATTR-CM, you should talk to your doctor to understand the next steps which are right for you. Consider sharing the information you learned today with your friends and your family.
Thank you once again, Dr. Chiadiki, for those rich information. Now we've got our final question for our viewing audience, and that is, how likely would you recommend one of these events in the future? How likely would you be likely to recommend one of these events in the future? Not likely, likely, or very likely? That's the kind of answer that we want to see. The viewing audience has voted. How likely would you be to recommend one of these events in the future? And we have 100% saying very likely. We were hoping that you would answer in that regard. And so that's very pleasing to us to let us know that we're trudging in the right direction. And I just want to say to everyone in the viewing audience, thank you for participating. Now, Voices for the Heart, talk to your doctor. That is what the message is from Voices for the Heart. Talk to your doctor. If you have any heart failure, if you have any signs or symptoms of ATTR-CM, visit yourheartsmessage.com/Don for more information. Now, here's the critical piece about this information resource is there's information resources in the website. Also, for those of you in the viewing audience, in your packet that gives you some coaching on how to have that conversation with your doctor. Some doctors may know, some doctors may not be aware, but we want you to leave here armed with the right information so you know how to interact with your doctor. I want to take the time to thank everyone who has participated here today and attended. Thank you, Dr. Don Chaney. Thank you, Dr. Chiadika. Thank you, Pfizer, for sponsoring this. Thank you for the Voices for Heart. And thank you again for the Life Organization, CDC, for making this a huge success. Thank you so much. And just understand all the information is available to you with the resources and the websites that have been made available to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The recording has stopped.
Ooh.